Is suffering a requirement set by God? Or is it just the turmoil that comes with being human? Does God's plan overlook our pain and troubles? Or could our hardships be creating an unexpected masterpiece on the canvas of life? These questions are not trivial. They bear the burden of our quest for purpose and meaning. In John chapter 9, verses 1 through 3, there's a story about a man born blind. The disciples were curious about why this man had to face such a challenge. Jesus' answer was quite insightful. He said, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him." The real significance wasn't the man's blindness itself, but the display of God's mercy that emerged from it. His suffering wasn't ignored. Instead, it became a route to reveal God's strength and love. Just like our own troubles, this man's ordeal wasn't considered unimportant. Rather, it was used as a means to serve a bigger purpose. Lazarus was resurrected from the clutch of death. Could it be Lazarus's suffering was part of God's divine plan? Or was it merely a consequence of our human vulnerability? Yet, even in this divine intervention, Lazarus had to suffer the cold hand of death before he could bask in the miracle of resurrection. But pause for a moment and ponder. Before the triumph, before the jubilant gasp of resurrection, Lazarus first had to experience the suffering of illness and the oblivion of death. Why would a kind and loving God allow his devoted follower to experience the bitterness of death before granting him the miraculous gift of life? However, like every paradox, the essence of truth is buried not in the contradiction, but in the harmony that lies beneath. God doesn't overlook our suffering. Instead, it becomes a part of the enormous celestial fabric of life, adding to the beauty of the universe and the wonder of our existence. Now consider the Apostle Paul, shipwrecked, beaten, and imprisoned, constantly on the edge of death. He carried in his body the marks of his hardship. Yet he found purpose in his pain. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 10, he wrote, "Therefore I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, in persecutions, in distresses, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong." Does this mean God is indifferent to our suffering? Far from it. God feels our pain. God knows our sorrow. Jesus Christ, God in human form, shed tears at Lazarus' tomb, participating in our shared sorrow. When Jesus bore the cross, he experienced every facet of human suffering. Physical pain, emotional abandonment, spiritual darkness. Yet the pain of crucifixion led to the triumph of resurrection. The suffering was profound, but the glory that followed was unprecedented. Think of the Apostle Peter, the rock upon which the church was built. Yet Peter denied Christ, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Here was suffering, self-inflicted, suffering born of fear and human frailty. And did this disqualify Peter from God's plan? Did his failure negate his destiny? No, my friends, even in his failure, even in his suffering, God's plan was at work. Peter's denial was not the end of his journey, but a transformative phase. Out of the ashes of his denial, he rose, stronger and more resolute. When we perceive our sufferings as part of God's plan, we are not dismissing our pain or trivializing our trials. Instead, we are acknowledging the mystery of divinity, the ability to bring beauty out of ashes, to bring hope out of despair. Isaiah chapter 48 verse 10 says, I have refined you, but not as silver is refined. Rather, I have refined you in the furnace of suffering. Yes, suffering is real, and it hurts. But it is as a furnace, a refining fire, a tool in the hands of the divine craftsman, shaping us, molding us into vessels of honor, instruments of his purpose. When you find yourself in the furnace of suffering, do not despair. Your suffering is not a sign of God's absence, but a testament to his presence, a promise of his power. Every tear you shed waters the soil of your spiritual growth. Every trial you endure strengthens your spiritual muscle. Every moment of suffering brings you a step closer to your divine destiny. Our tribulations, our pain, and our suffering do not nullify God's plan. Instead, they magnify the magnitude of his miracles. They serve as the raw canvas upon which God paints his grandeur. The depth of the valley only amplifies the height of the mountain. The struggles you face today are the raw material for the miracles you will witness tomorrow. Your pain is not without purpose. Your suffering is not without significance. Let your trials be the furnace that refines your faith. Let your sorrow be the soil where your hope takes root. When you feel alone in the fire, remember, the fourth man is in the fire with you. His name is Emmanuel, God with us. I'm not saying every moment of suffering is a divine decree or a spiritual test. Some suffering is simply a consequence of living in a fallen world. But in every moment of suffering, God is with you. He is there in your pain, in your despair, in your trials, and in your tears. In the hands of God, your tears become the river of your transformation. Your trials become the furnace of your faith. And your pain becomes the hammer that shapes your purpose. Hold on, my friends. Hold on to your faith. For even in your suffering, God is at work. He is shaping you, molding you, preparing you for a destiny greater than your dreams, for a future brighter than your imagination. Hold on, for your morning is coming. And oh, what a glorious morning it will be.